Breathing is something that causes so many flute players so much anxiety, and yet it is possibly one of the most important parts of playing the flute. We play a wind instrument after all. So today we are taking a deep dive into the world of flute breathing. Hi everybody, my name is Tatiana and this is the Flute Practice, a space to help you through the frustrations of learning the flute so that you can reach your goal and ultimate dream of playing this beautiful instrument. We are going to be separating today's video into looking at the in-breath and looking at the out-breath. We're also going to be looking a little bit at support, and I have created timestamps in this video so that you can kind of skip around as you need to. It's a fairly long video, but by the end of this video, I believe that you are going to experience a whole new way of breathing and support on the flute. I also really believe that you will see almost an instant improvement in your sound if this is an area that you have struggled with. Now, in the first part of this video, we're going to be speaking about the in-breath. I'm going to be showing you guys some exercises around this. It is going to get a little bit technical, but I really believe that the secret to breathing lies in understanding the mechanism behind breathing and how it works in our body. Because the reality is we breathe over 20,000 times a day, in and out very naturally, so you know how to breathe. Whether you like to believe it or not, your body is the master breather. It does it all the time, every day. And yes, you're probably going to be like, yes, but playing the flute is different kind of a breathing. And while there are differences, and definitely you need more air than you normally do in your day-to-day life, and you need more control of that air, the mechanism behind it is actually pretty much the same. And that is why we need to really look into this and understand it. So, most of you will probably know you have these two beautiful lungs in your body, lovely organs that help us to get the air into our body. They are like big balloons. They inflate and deflate when we breathe in and breathe out. But the really important muscle involved in breathing is this muscle under the lungs called the diaphragm. It's this lovely kind of double dome-shaped muscle that sits there. And what happens is when you are about to breathe in, your brain sends that nice muscle a message saying, we need air, and that muscle contracts and pushes downward. Now, this is really important to note. You cannot, out of your own will, contract that muscle. Like if I say to you, tighten your diaphragm, you cannot do it. You might tighten the muscles around it, so you'll tighten your kind of abdominal muscles, but that actual diaphragmatic muscle is not in your control. It is an automatic process, and this is incredibly important to understand, and you will find out why in a moment. So that diaphragm goes down. There are some what we call intercostal muscle, fancy words for the little muscles between your ribs that also get sent this message, and they expand, open up that rib cage, and what happens is that there's a vacuum that forms in your torso, in those lungs, and that nice spongy lung fills automatically with air. So that air kind of naturally rushes in to your lungs rather than you kind of slurping in that air because there's a vacuum. It's kind of like when you have a bottle and you have it empty and then you squeeze it and you put it under water and then you release it, the water goes into the bottle. It's a very similar mechanism. And that's not because you have filled that bottle with water. That's just got to do with the fact that there's suddenly extra space or a low pressure and that water goes in. Okay, so back to our diaphragm. We have that lovely diaphragm. It contracts downward. Now we have a problem because as it contracts downward, there are a bunch of organs that were in that space that it's now moved into, and those organs need to go somewhere. They need to have space to move somewhere. Otherwise, your diaphragm is going to get stuck. It cannot move down. And what do? They move down and out. They're a little bit restricted by your hips that are preventing it from just moving down. So out is the most natural place for them to move. And this is why, and this is so important. This is why your belly, when you breathe in, should go out. I've had students that argue with me on this point. It is a biological fact that when you breathe in, your belly wants to go out. And we can just for a moment inspect what happens if our belly doesn't go out. So if that diaphragm cannot move down properly because those organs are now in the way, maybe you're even tightening your abdominal muscles when you breathe in, that diaphragm is actually going to get stuck there and the lungs are not going to be able to expand as fully. Remember, you're only getting as much air into your lungs as there is space for it to enter. So if there's no space, no air. So there are a bunch of different parts of your body that are involved in the breath. You've got, of course, your ribs and your rib cage that open up. We're going to get a little bit more into this rib movement in a moment. You've obviously got that diaphragm, which you don't have any control over, that does some work. And you've got your belly and your abdominal muscles that need to respond in some sort of a way. And the question is, how do they respond? And here's the thing about breathing in. The in-breath should be a completely passive response. There are some muscles doing work, so your diaphragm is doing some work. Some of those intercostal, those little in-between rib muscles are doing some work. But the action of it should be a completely releasing one, because your abdominal muscles, the muscles you can control, should be completely releasing when you breathe in. They should not be tightening. So that when we're breathing in like a big balloon, we are just inflating. For most people, for some really bizarre reason, this feeling is lost. We lose it somewhere along the way. And we tend to breathe, lifting our shoulders, sucking in our bellies, and kind of filling up with air like this, and imagining that somehow that is how we get the most amount of air. I hope by now that you can see that this is really not how you breathe naturally. Watch a little baby sleeping. It's amazing. Those little bellies just go up and down like that. It's so wonderful to watch. So now we understand how we naturally breathe, what we naturally do every single day. But you're probably going to say to me, yeah, but number one, on flute, I choose to breathe, like I initiate the breathing. It's not just an automatic response from my brain. And number two, for flute, I need way more air than a normal everyday life. And you're right, although you need less air than you probably think, but we'll get to that in a moment. But yes, we can initiate the breath. We can choose when we do and don't want to breathe, although we can't choose to stop breathing altogether. We will eventually breathe, but we can choose, now I want to breathe, and we can allow it. But the emphasis there is on allow it. We can kind of synthetically create a breath. It's usually not the best way to breathe, but often when we just allow a breath, like in a yawn, for example, if you're going to yawn, such a nice feeling. You are just allowing the breath. You are not creating it. Explore this yawning, because after a while, you'll actually start to feel how everything just releases and opens up. Try yawn with a tight belly. It's awful. In my teaching studio, yawning is always a compliment. It never means I'm boring. It actually means you're breathing good. So if you're yawning, I usually get very excited. So those are the big differences with flute breathing. It's just a bit deeper, and we choose when to do it. Okie dokie. I hope we've got that covered, because we are now going to start to experience some of this amazing breath. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put our hands onto our jaw. Why onto our jaw, you ask? Good question. Your skull is pretty much made up of one solid bone. So you've got all these bones that are like fused together, but it's essentially one big solid bone. There's only one big bone that can move, and that is your lower jaw. I'm not speaking about the inner ear bones and all of that. I'm just speaking about your actual skull at this point. So when we breathe in, it's actually our lower jaw that opens to allow the air in. Fun little fact, when we speak, we don't speak with kind of the upper part of our head moving. It's the jaw that does all the work. Weird to think about, isn't it? I find it super weird to think about. So we're going to put our hands onto our jaw, and we're just going to breathe in, feeling that jaw opening nicely. So for some of you, this should already be a really releasing, freeing feeling. It's so lovely. So if it is, just spend some more time there. Just really experience and feel that type of breath. Good. We're now going to move our hands to our throats to feel nice, open, free breathing over here. It is so important in breathing and in flute playing generally that we have an open throat. And people with throat tension, it often starts in the breath already, because we breathe kind of like this, lifting the shoulders, sucking in the belly, and kind of closing the throat. Ideally, a breath should be almost noiseless. Like a really good free breath is, my belly made noises, but my throat and my chest did not make noises. We're going to put our hands onto our throat just so we can really feel what's happening. You can do one hand, you can do two hands. It looks like I'm going to strangle myself. Don't do that. Just putting your hands there. And we're going to breathe in. Now, a nice, useful way to keep that throat nice and open is to think of a ho or a haw sound. Ho is really nice, so you think, just thinking ho. Or another one that's really good is to imagine a good yawn. So put your hands on your throat and yawn. And feel, if you can feel anything kind of closing off there, try to just keep it as open as possible. So the next place that we're going to experience the breath is kind of the obvious logical place on our chest, up here where our lungs are. So we're going to put our hands on our chest and we're just going to breathe in nicely. Now here it might be helpful to focus again on dropping your lower jaw and thinking of that nice ho breath. And just experience that. Interestingly, you're going to feel not that much movement here. Hopefully. Don't be alarmed by this. You're not going to feel as much movement here as you think. We're going to get to that in a moment, so just bear with me. Okay, now we're going to put our hands onto our bellies. We're going to feel the breath in our bellies. And again, don't focus on breathing into your belly. This often causes tension. So just focus on dropping that jaw, feeling that nice ho breath, and experiencing that breath nicely like that. And again, we're going to breathe in. Now you're going to put your hands around the bottom parts of your ribs, and you will feel kind of the edge of your ribs here. We're going to chat about that in a second, but let's first just feel the breath there. So we're going to breathe in. Again, focus on the ho, focus on the dropping jaw. Now it may really surprise you that there's more movement in the bottom of your ribs than there is up here. And that is because of the way the ribs are structured. Your rib cage is not just kind of like a locked cage like this. It's actually connected more at the top than at the bottom. And this is simply because your top ribs are connected to your sternum, which is your breastbone over here. They are connected there, and they're connected, of course, to your back, to your spine. As you go further down the rib cage, there is more and more cartilage between the ribs and the sternum, which creates a little bit more flexibility. And as you get to the very bottom, those kind of bones you could feel in your belly, those are your floating ribs. They are not connected to your body in any other place other than at the back and your spine. This means that the bottom ribs are able to open more than the top ribs, so they can expand more. So the rib cage, when you breathe in, opens out like that. It doesn't just kind of go in and out like that. It actually opens out and up. Super important, because if we're feeling the breathing all the way up here the whole time in the shoulders, we are again breathing with the least natural part of the body and the lungs. We are fighting against our bodies. Guys, I really, really, really believe if it's not natural, you are fighting against your body, and that is going to cause problems. We're always looking for what is the most natural and then the most practical. Luckily with breathing, those two things collide very, very nicely. In fact, most things in flute playing do kind of meet up. Okay, the last place we're now going to breathe, you're going to put your hands onto your lower back nicely like this. And we're going to just focus on opening your throat, opening that lower jaw, feeling that nice yawning ho breath. And hopefully you will feel some movement there. Now, not everyone's going to feel this straight away, especially if this way of breathing is new to you. So I'm going to show you guys some really nice little positions you can get into that really help to experience this breath. The first one is pretty simple. All you're going to do is you're just going to release those knees, release those hips, and you're just going to fold over, like bend over basically, and just flop forward. Now from this position, you can really just allow your arms and your head to just hang down completely. Make sure that your knees are released, please, because if you have tight knees, you're gonna have problems. So just release everything and fall forward. And now you just, from this position, just going to breathe. And you should feel it into this lower back. You can even put your hands there and just feel it. Release again. The other really nice position is to sit on a nice chair like I'm busy doing now. And we're going to just open our knees like this nicely. And then we're going to put our elbows onto the front of our knees and we're going to lean forward with our head. Make sure that your back is not kind of arching, that you're really nice and flat and released with your back, bending from the hips. And here now, you're going to just take a nice breath in, make sure that your full upper body weight is in your knees, and breathe in and breathe out. This is such a great position again. If you've had a crazy day, you can even take it a step further and completely release and lean your body weight over your legs. The last really lovely position you can do is lying down on the floor with your knees bent. It's what we call the semi-supine position. And here you can also just experience your breath, just naturally breathing, feeling that belly rise and fall gently. All of these positions super relaxing. And if you've had crazy days or you just need to kind of release your body a bit, I promise you 10 minutes of this breathing and you will be sorted for the day. Okay, so quick little recap of what we've learned in the in-breath. Really important. First of all, we've realized that the in-breath is a passive releasing kind of a feeling. It should be a complete opening, releasing. Secondly, we've learned that it's the lower part of your body that you're going to feel it more. You're going to feel that belly going out. You're going to feel those lower ribs opening more than you're going to feel it up in the top part of your body. Thirdly, we've learned the importance of keeping the throat and the mouth open and free in order to get and initiate this kind of breathing. Now, of course, easier said than done, right? Beautiful free open breaths when you're doing those nice exercises and standing in all kinds of weird positions, but what happens when you actually play the flute and you're just standing up? Everything seems to go out the window. I know. So the first thing we're going to do before we get onto the out breath is we're just going to practice some nice long tones, taking in this full, easy breath, just experiencing it. Helpful cues again. Think of the yawning feeling is very helpful. Think about dropping that lower jaw and think about that ho in breath. Also, just quickly check that your hips and your knees are released. Really, really, really important. I recently did a video on kind of body balance stuff, so go check that out if you're feeling tight in your body. Any tension in your body is going to affect your breathing. I can guarantee it, 100%. So we're just going to take that breath, bring your flute up, and we're going to just any note, a B or a G, whatever you like really, it doesn't matter. We're just going to feel that nice opening ho breath. That's it. No fancy sound. Don't try to sound good. Just experience how that feels. And this is so important. A lot of what we're doing today, especially with the in-breath, is about observing the feeling rather than trying to create the feeling. And sometimes when we're over-focusing, for example, on opening the belly or doing any of that, we kind of get tight and tense, like I mentioned earlier, rather than just kind of passively observing, oh, look, my belly's opening. So focus on the cues, those three cues, the yawn, the ho, and the jaw dropping, rather than trying to kind of open up or breathe into any specific areas of your body. A quick little side note here, because I think it is important to just say, people experience breathing very differently. And so if none of these cues work for you, that is also fine. Some people, it does help to breathe into specific parts of the body. So when I say don't do it, I mean, don't do it if it's causing tension. If it's causing you to breathe really nicely, where it feels really good and open, then do it. Definitely do it. So now you're probably going to ask me a great question. You're like, okay, cool. So in-breath, relaxation, release, I'm just opening up. Like, is that it? Is flute playing just totally relaxing and not doing anything? Yes, kind of, but also no. Of course, we have to do something. And this is what I think so many people get wrong about breathing. We're so focused on getting enough air and kind of filling up with as much air as possible. And we forget two really important things. We forget that the in-breath, it's about the quality of the in-breath, not so much about the quantity of the in-breath. And it's about breath control and support, how we breathe out. That is going to make the difference, whether or not you're going to get through a phrase or not. Okay, goody. We get to move on to the out breath now. Now, I am separating the out breath from support. I am saying that there is a difference, and there should be a difference between these two. You could have really fast air without support, and it would be a very ineffective breath. So we need both of these things, but we also need to understand they actually function separately. The good news is that as soon as you've taken that good kind of expansive breath in, support is activated. there is your support already there for you. And I'm going to explain support in a moment, but just know this, nothing is possible without that good breath in. So before we even go into what support is, I'm going to do a very quick little exercise so that you can hopefully experience this for yourself. The first thing you're going to do is you're just going to take that nice opening ho full breath in. And now you're going to exhale on a S or a F. So S or F, like that. And you will hopefully feel what goes on in your belly, how some of those abdominal muscles start to engage. And now is their time to shine, because this is where they start to have a function and a role. I'm going to say this a few times in this video because it's so important. You are not squeezing, you are not pushing, you are not forcing. Those three things should never be connected with support. If anybody has ever told you that that is how you support on the flute, I'm sorry to say it, but they are wrong. They are wrong. Drama moment over, but I'm serious. This is really important. We don't want to squeeze and we don't want to force. A nice little way just to feel these muscles again is to say quite kind of explosively with lots of air, cha. So we're going to do cha, 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 cha. And you'll feel these kind of little pulses there in your belly. It's a really nice little way to feel and wake up that support. Cha, 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 cha. Again, this isn't about squeezing or forcing. It's really about these like little buoyant, dynamic kind of bounces in your belly. Cha, 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 cha. They're engaged, they're ready, rather than like, everybody, get up, let's support. Yeah, no. Good, let's get into what support is for a moment. Basically, when we breathe out, of course, the opposite happens as with the in-breath. So we've breathed in, everything's opened up, we've got that diaphragm that's flattened out. Now the diaphragm is actually wanting to naturally release. Remember, it was contracting, so it was tightening to go down. Now it wants to release again, like that. That's its natural desire when we breathe out, right? Of course, this is not helpful for flute playing. Thank goodness we don't just have to breathe like this, because we want that air to go out really slowly and controlled. You have no control of your diaphragm. It wants to relax. Problem, right? Well, not so much, because we've got these lovely abdominal muscles that are able to control the release of that diaphragm and of the whole rib structure and very slowly release the air. But rather than thinking about squeezing in the muscles, I like to think about the muscles creating an outward resistance. So while the whole kind of body wants to do this, your support or your abdominal muscles that are causing the support are just gently pushing back and slowing it down. It's kind of like, imagine you have like a really heavy like car that you want to roll down a hill. You're not going to be pushing that car. You're going to actually be pushing back on that car to slow it down the hill, because it's going to go down the hill. It wants to go down the hill, right? Same with your breathing. Your breathing wants to go out. Like, you don't have to force it out. It's going to do it. I promise you, all on its own. We want to actually slow down the release of the air. So that is what you're doing. You are just pushing back slowly to allow that air to go out bit by bit. So we're going to do it again on this and see if you can feel a little bit of this. So we take a nice yawning breath in. And now, and for any of you who think you don't have any like lung capacity or your breathing's terrible, just do this and see how long you can go, and you'll realize your body knows how to do this. I want to say this again. Your body knows how to do this. Tell yourself this regularly. I'm dead serious, and give yourself like a high five, because your body is amazing. It knows how to breathe. It knows what it's doing. You are the one getting in the way. A lovely way that I really like to practice this breathing and breath control, because that's really what it is, right? We need to breathe in well, and then we need to learn how to control the air. And so a really great way to control this air is just to play long tones. It sounds so simple, but it is so important. Something I love to do is I like to play long tones starting with less air and getting more and more and more and more air until I run out. And that's because usually when we take a good full breath in, we feel like we have so much air, and now we have to just use all the air. Why? Because that's our body's natural desire. We've realized this today, right? Our body just wants to release that air. So we got to breathe in And we've got to let those little muscles all engage. They've got to be like, hold it, boys. Everybody hold your positions, and then slowly, slowly, slowly release. That support feeling, so that feeling of kind of those muscles staying engaged and just controlling the air, is something that I only release once I've finished the note. I like to always think of the support being there before I start a note. So I breathe in and I engage a little bit those muscles to kind of get everything ready. Then I start the note, play till the end. Only once the note is finished do I then release the whole system. Really, really, really important. I hope you're starting to see the difference between supporting the air and just airspeed and releasing the air. They are connected, they are best friends, but they are different. And maybe past the scope of today's video, but in more details, you can actually see how the support helps to control the airspeed as well, and we can really play with this, but that's another video. One last little fun tip for you guys. Remember those nice positions we were in earlier, where we were standing bent over or sitting on the chair? You can actually play in those positions too. Really important in both positions is just to make sure that the end of your flute is pointing down to the ground so that you're not twisting your whole body, that your body is staying nice and neutral. You will kind of pivot your head and play your flute down to the floor. Try it. It's pretty cool. Okay guys, I hope you learned some really cool things in this video and have given your breathing a nice kind of kickstart. If you guys are not yet part of my Patreon space, I really encourage you guys to get involved. There are technique classes that happen. Yep, live technique classes. We meet on Zoom and we go through some of these exercises and techniques that I talk about in my classes and in some of the Patreon only workshops. And speaking of which, there is a Patreon only workshop happening right now. You're quite late to the party, but not too late to get involved. You can still start either from where we are or go back to the beginning and go for it. Happy practicing, everybody, and see you guys soon.